Welcome to the Microdosing for Healing podcast. I'm your host, Casey Garrett, and together we'll be discovering and learning from inspiring voices of healers, medicine keepers, and visionaries. Every episode, we'll explore the world of health, vibrant wellness, and natural medicine for a new era of human society. Welcome to today's episode. All right. Hello, beautiful people. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm really excited to share this gentleman with you today. Mr. Riley Cote is here with us. And on a personal note, I am particularly excited to welcome him because I grew up in Pennsylvania, and this is going to be the episode that all of my childhood friends, teammates, and coaches finally tune into this podcast for. So thank you, Riley, for being with us. Riley is a former NHL hockey player. He played with the Philadelphia Flyers and has such a powerful, inspiring, and transformative story. So I know all of you are going to love hearing it and be really inspired by his share. So thank you so much for being with us today, Riley.
No, thanks for having me. Grateful.
Perfect. So I'd love to start off today with Riley, if you're open to sharing your personal story a bit and how you got to this place.
Yeah, geez, where do I begin? So I grew up in the middle of Canada playing hockey like most Canadian children do. I was fortunate enough to play professional hockey. I moved away from home when I was 16 years old, played in the Western Hockey League, was never drafted. And then 20 years old, I turned pro and I decided to take on a role within the hockey game, which was landed up being the enforcer role. I became a hockey fighter, if you believe that that's actually a thing. Well, you're from Pennsylvania, so you probably might know what that is. But so I landed up being a professional hockey fighter for 8 years and figured out a way to make it to the NHL and live out my childhood dream, or a version of my childhood dream, because it certainly wasn't fighting guys way to my weight class. Growing up, it was scoring goals like Wayne Gretzky, and but how the dream kind of shapes itself, as you maneuver throughout life. But as you can imagine, fighting is taxing, physically taxing, mentally taxing, emotionally, spiritually taxing. And early on in my fighting career, it was such a challenge for me. It was such an opportunity. It was like I was young. I was excited. I felt like this was my vehicle. This was necessary, and which it was, if I wanted to play in the NHL. So there was an eagerness, there was an excitement to it, and as I fought my way out of the jungle, if you will, the minor leagues, the minor leagues, to the minor leagues, to the next level of minor leagues, and then eventually found my way. It was quite the ride. And eventually I found myself in the NHL, doing the exact same job I had done in the minor leagues, for pennies, and grinding the physical body, fighting daily, every other day. It seemed like 30, 35 times a year, a season. And after my first year, my first year in the NHL was my best year, as a performer, as a hockey player, as a fighter. And then I felt like it turned after that. Like I landed up playing parts of 3 more years, but it just wasn't the same mentally. I found myself just constantly having to find more creative ways to jack myself up even more to fight. It was the fighting and that role had consumed me, where I almost you kind of become that character in a sense, but you also. In that specific example, I didn't love to do it. Jacking yourself up to fight a guy way out of your weight class isn't exactly what I would consider fun. Even though you're living the dream, right? You're living in this bubble and you're playing hockey for a living. You're getting paid, more money than you ever been made, but just something that wasn't there. So between the physical component, the mental component. After that first year, it just felt like it was a grind. The physical was easy. It was the mental. It was the preparation of the fight. It was like this chronic state of anxiety that you find yourself in. Because traditionally, it's fight or flight. You pick one, right? I'm either going to go out there and fight right out of the gate, or I'm not going to fight. But hockey is not a UFC fight. It's not a boxing match where the bell rings and you fight. You don't know exactly when you're going to fight. You may prepare to fight and never fight. So there's this chronic the state of anxiety that you're in. Even if you fight, the first period, you could potentially fight again. So you're never able to let your guard down, and just wears on the nervous system. It just find yourself emotionally exhausted to being in that state, and in that state of I say chronic anxiety. It's really the only words I have for it. It's just you just feel stressed the hell out. So the long and short of it is, eventually, like, all these things kind of, accumulated: stressors, physical stressors, mental stressors, performance stressors, emotionally, imbalanced, the spiritually unaligned. And then, in 2010, my performance started deteriorating. I was drinking a lot. I was doing other drugs. I was not rested. I just was burying the pain, which I didn't really understand at the time, how much I was actually bearing, what I was actually bearing. When you think of pain, it's always physical pain, right? Everyone's like, "Oh, you're a fighter. Your hands must be sore. Your face must be sore." But it was more emotional pain of, like, I really wanted to just crawl into a hole. I really didn't want to be fighting in front of 20,000 people. I really didn't love what I was doing, even though I was in the NHL. And, from the outside looking in, it seemed like you got your shit together. But I didn't. So I had another year on my contract. End of 2010, we lost the Chicago Blackhawks in the final, and another year on my contract. And I told the general manager, I kind of just opened my heart up a little bit, where I was at. He kind of known where I was at. I didn't play much that last year. And then, it's funny how when you put it out there and you speak to the universe and you're kind of vulnerable and you're opened up, like, how the universe responds. And I was back home in Winnipeg, where I'm from, in Canada. And like 2 weeks after the season, I get a phone call from the general manager saying, would you be interested in coaching, the Flyers minor league team? And I was like, instantly in my heart, I was like, this is it. Like, this is exit stage left. This is like, get on the other side of the fence and save yourself kind of deal. So I said, let me sleep on it, which I did. I knew in my heart what the decision was. I called the next morning. I said, yeah, I'm going to do this. But it wasn't so much, it wasn't about, oh yeah, I can't wait to get into coaching at 28 years old. It was like, this is an opportunity to, like, take a breath and find yourself and figure out what the hell, and heal yourself, really. So that's how I, like, propelled onto this path, which, I had a relationship with cannabis. I had a relationship with psilocybin mushrooms, but very misunderstood, very recreational, if you will. Even though I could sense there was some therapeutic value, I could never communicate that to the public. I could never, sit here and talk to you about exactly what was happening, because I didn't really know. I didn't have any science to really support the way I was feeling. So that was the beginning of the journey, where I started to make sense of how cannabis made me feel as far as pain management. My last two surgeries at the end of that year, actually, I just used cannabis. I didn't touch the pharmaceutical drugs, just used cannabis. And then that, helped me realize, oh, wow, this is obviously an amazing pain management tool. I don't need the pills, which were obviously really destructive, mixing those with alcohol, just on your spirit and everything. And then I kind of applied the same logic with the cannabis. It's like, oh, well, of course, pain management. That's why people have been using pain, cannabis forever, managing pain, emotional pain, anxiety, sleep, the whole bit. And then I applied that to psilocybin. I, read some literature around psilocybin in the brain, and I had kind of done the same thing with the cannabis, the CBD, the neuroprotectant, the neurogenesis properties of some of these compounds. And I was like, geez, I've been punched in the face for a living, been over 200 hockey fights, obviously got some repeated head trauma, concussion related issues I was dealing with. So I was like, let's immerse ourselves in this and sit with it, by myself, not going to a concert or a festival and distracting the mind and making it more of a recreational experience. It was sitting with this and trying to heal the brain. So I really got into it around healing the physical, right? It was healing the body, it was healing the mind, the brain. And little did I know how spiritual, this is psilocybin specifically, but it's all divine. It's all sacred, but I grew up in a religious household, and I always considered myself somewhat spiritual, but how it helped propel me onto the spiritual path. And it was like a catalyst to get to the meditation cushion and to the yoga mat, and how much it was like, how much more it was than what I thought it was. I was, approaching it through the cult of the body. But it's so much more than that, obviously, right? As I was, healing the brain, I was realizing I was shedding, my old skin of who I thought I was. It was like this metamorphosis of transition, if you will, like losing the old Riley and kind of coming into this understanding of recreating myself as a spirit versus, a physical body, which I think I'd master that at, lifting weights and being this, this mindless beast on the ice to, realizing that was a little bit self-serving and I need to be more of service and, kind of put all these things in perspective. So a little long-winded, but it was all that, let's say the trauma, the repeated head trauma, the way of life, the squeeze, the stress, the pressures, it kind of just like spat me out and forced me to either, continue to go down this path or to find a solution and get better and save yourself. And that's what I did. I stopped drinking for a year to prove to myself I didn't need alcohol. I eventually reintroduced a little bit of some wine, but it's been 3.5 years that I haven't drank alcohol again. But just like cleaning the body out and realizing how much poison I was pouring into my body, just the thinking, the poison, like literally drinking, poison, eating shitty, all these things. So you have to clean up the vessel and show it some love. And it just obviously continues to keep growing, and the layers of unwinding these programs continued. And then the cannabis and the psilocybin and these medicines and these tools they just keep evolving on how I work with them. The relationship with them continues to evolve, and there's more understanding in them, and understanding specifically, psilocybin or psychedelics and how it pertains to, mindfulness in the world I'm in, and like the mind and, the present moment and emotion. We grew up in a culture where talking about our feelings is not a thing we do, right? It's bottle it up, suppress it, tough it out, go nuts. And obviously that's not healthy. It's extremely unhealthy to bottle up emotion. So this whole world of expression, physical expression through yoga, mindful movement. Obviously, I've been stiff and, dancing and, music, playing the drum, rhythmic, mindfulness and drumming. So all these things that I would have never thought I would be into growing up. I was like, no, I'm a hockey player. I'm a tough hockey player. And it's just like, it's delusion, So it's kind of like helped me, peel back the onion and unprogram some of these, these conditioned things that I've, was unaware of. And, I'm going to continue to do so. We all got work to do. And I'm constantly, working on deprogramming, reprogramming, and there's no new reminders all the time, and it's been beautiful. It's just like you couldn't script something like this. Growing up, you think of like playing the NHL is this glorious thing, and it probably is for a lot of people that can score, goals and keep the body and the mind a little more sane. But I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm so grateful for all the hardships and the drive and the resilience and the lessons in it all. And now I can just apply, what I've learned in the sports world in hockey to real life and this world of healing and helping people, being of service and, being the change. So I apologize for the long-winded answer there.
No, not at all. Not at all. I appreciate it so much. Speaking of, so ESPN did a beautiful documentary of your work. And so my next question is around how are other professional athletes and colleagues of yours receiving this transformation for you when you're introducing it to other people? How is that usually being received?
I would say very, very positively. I mean, from the start, honestly, when I retired back in 2010, I was beginning to bang the drum around hemp and cannabis, really kind of the industrial applications of the cannabis plant. So like, supporting cannabis, these shirts, hemp, and, showing the different faces of cannabis. So I was, doing some advocacy work early. And, I would say back then, people thought I was a little crazy. Like, oh, like all of a sudden you're retired, you're retired. Now you're like talking about cannabis, like it's this gift from God, which, obviously it is. And it just needs to be understood a little more and respected a little bit more. But nonetheless, so I think early on I was, got hemp seeds and hemp protein into the locker room, which was quickly removed because it was a non-NSF certified product and all this, this political, fluff that it was thrown at me. But nonetheless, I just stuck with it. And then as time progressed and things started to change, through legislation, the farm bills and, the CBD, some of these things moving along, people started to realize that I was actually being truthful, with my position and what I was doing. And, the cannabis become more normalized, and I got an opportunity to get in front of the Flyers alumni, and speak about, the Pennsylvania, New Jersey cannabis programs, and, the difference between, medical cannabis and hemp-derived CBD products that are sold in health food stores, and so on. So naturally, it landed up working out in my favor, where they were realizing that what I was saying wasn't that far off. And, now the science, which was kind of always there, that was brought to the surface, and, the laws were kind of catching up to the stance. And so since then, like almost the psilocybin and the psychedelic piece almost seemed to be easier of a sell, because I'd already been doing a lot of this advocacy work, and putting my neck out there for, speaking for the trees, and all that good stuff. So when this kind of, I started speaking around psilocybin about 5-6 years ago. Um, it was almost like an easy introduction. We're like, oh shit, well, like, you got cannabis, right? And I can see that you've changed. You lost, 30, 35 pounds. You're living it. You're not just talking about it. That it seemed like a natural progression. But it's always one of those things, like, people could seem like they understand what you're talking about. And I always believe, like, like, people need to see it to really maybe understand it. You have an idea what it is. So I thought the ESPN piece that, as you mentioned, did a good job of kind of showing the best possible visual for what potentially healing could look like with, in a group setting with psilocybin, however that looks. So since then, it's been even more positive, where, like, they're like, oh shit, like, I see what you're doing now. I kind of understand what you're doing now, and or at least some version of what you're doing. So it's been nothing but positive. Like, every time I go to the rink and see alumni guys, they're asking, like, about the mushrooms. They're asking about this and that, and they're curious. And these are old school guys, like, stuck in, like, the old school propaganda. A lot of these guys are, gone through the AA program, substance abuse. So traditionally, cannabis and mushrooms wouldn't be part of the AA program. It's abstinence, pure abstinence. So it's kind of, at least in my world, in my network, seems to be helping reform the conversation around addictions and recovery, because a lot of these guys really deal with the alcoholism and struggle with alcohol. So it's been really well received, and it continues to be. I have people reaching out to me, I mean, all the time, like, every day, whether it's on social media or someone's, shooting an email or text message about, like, I see what you're doing, and, I want to learn more, or just the time is so now, and it's so necessary. It's always been, but I mean, you realize the more you're in this work, I mean, you're talking to people all the time, how much people are suffering, the level of physical pain, the level of emotional pain that people are going through. Like, the system has failed them. It's failed us, right? I mean, it's the current protocols, the current medications are a cocktail for darkness. And, I see it more and more the more work I do. So it's been very, very well received. I'm going to continue to use the sports platform. As we know, like, people love their sports. I'm a nobody, in a sports, and, and it's like, I'm looking like Aaron Rodgers. Some of these bigger names came out and started talking about this, Tom Brady, Wayne Gretzky. I mean, we can move the needle, I would think, quite significantly, but some people are just not ready to speak about it, and it's fair enough. I respect that, but the more people that do, the bigger the ripple. And I've seen it a lot in cannabis. I see more and more guys speaking in the sports world around psilocybin or ayahuasca or bufo, whatever it lands up being. And it's just, the more media, the more, the more information, the more media covers this, the more seeds are planted, and people can at least hear it more. Mainstream media is covering. Oh, ESPN, owned by Disney, is covering this. So, like, people that never have heard of this, at least maybe, like, their ears perk up. So there's nothing more than just keep planting seeds, right? You're not going to change people overnight. There's a deep-seated program within society, and it's going to take some time to fully unravel it, but we may never fully unravel it. I don't think it was designed to be fully unraveled, but there's more and more people waking up. And I think the sports platform just has a lot of essence and juice to reach people that aren't traditionally, hearing this type of information, so.
100%, 100%. I would love to get your take on, one of the things I've most appreciated when I was listening to your podcast and previous presentations, how much you align spirituality with the practice as being a fundamental part of the practice and not necessarily divorcing the two. And we live in such a secular moment. So can you speak a little bit to people who are questioning, like, well, can I just can I just work with medicines as a drug, or versus a spiritual path where you're incorporating other modalities, meditation, yoga, as you have?
Yeah. Well, I think this is super important because I see a lot of people being advocates and they're kind of, skirt tailing the obvious, right? I mean, the skirt tailing the essence of what the medicine is, right? And this is spiritual medicine, this is spiritual work. So I think the challenge for a lot of people is the medical system has separated the emotional and spiritual bodies from healing, right? It's just when we're healing in the traditional Western um, paradigm, it's just symptoms. It's really just approaching the physical body as a meat suit, as a symptom, as a compound. But when we look at the the crisis that we're in, people call it a mental health crisis. I mean, to me, it's a spiritual crisis. Like, we are disconnected, right? Disconnected from source, this intelligent, conscious energy that permeates everything. People misunderstand God and misunderstand what the teachings are. And I think that the psychedelics, some people call them teachers, some people call them reminders. I mean, I'd like to think that we already know this information. We've done this before, right? So these medicines are reminding us of our spiritual nature, and helping us reconnect to these and the system, this energy system. Our food. Beginning with food or beginning with breath, however you want to look at it. These fundamental things that we have forgotten to do, forgotten to eat, nutritious, nutrient-rich foods that would nourish our physical body, our vessel, our temple, and our mind, our thinking, right, and our energy, and we just abandoned this idea of staying close to nature, taking care of our bodies, right? So when people want to get well, I mean, we live in this crazy world where people just want a pill and they want to take this pill and they want to wake up and feel better and they want everything to go away and everything to be fine. And well, as you know, that's not the way it works, right? I mean, we live in a very intricate, some bit complicated, but also some bit simplistic way of life. This world we're living in, and I think the system is responsible for distracting our minds and reprogramming. Colonialism's obviously been a big part of it, but we've kind of separated from spirit. I think the system, the darkness, has always, spiritually booby trapped mankind, separating man from God. Every spiritual religious text talks about it, right? So these medicines are reminding us, wow, we got this energy system that we're all a part of. It's helping us find ourselves, therefore helps us find God, in some way, shape, or form. But this connection to our body, our connection to our thoughts, to our emotions, again, piggybacking off what I was saying earlier about suppressing of emotions. Like, we have to own our emotions. We think and then we feel and then we act, and it's all connected. So for people that are coming in this that have no spiritual practice, it seems like, oh, well, spirituality is not for me. I'm not spiritual. Well, we're all spiritual, right? I mean, we are spiritual beings, whether we know it or not is a different story. And we need to address it in some way, shape, or form. We could take the religion out of it. We can take all these woo-woo words around it, but the reality is that we are a part of something much greater than ourselves, and we have to say follow to some degree these natural laws that exist. It's not man-made laws; these are laws that exist throughout nature, and they're karmic laws, right? I mean, you are what you eat, right? I mean, we've heard that one 1,000 times. Well, it's like, well, that would be a spiritual teaching. We are what we think. I'm just hell bent set on talking about this because I think that, especially in the medical context, people don't want to be talking. They feel like they can't, or they're not even equipped to talk about it because it's so medical. You see this even in cannabis, where it's gone like, so medical, so recreational. It's like, well, cannabis is a very important spiritual medicine, if used properly, appropriately, intentionally. Could be an amazing, spiritual tool. I mean, a lot of people would consider cannabis is as psychedelic. if we're using it for more journey work. But nonetheless, it's just like our relationship with nature has been severed, and relationship to self has been severed. So we don't even understand that that these medicines are kind of a waking up the kundalini, or whatever you want to call it, this energy within, the fire within, and then bringing it back to the present moment and bringing it back to our thinking that we actually do have control in this world, that we're not the victim. So there's this level of empowerment because we can alchemize any second, any part of the day, all day long, if we're that disciplined, and work with nature instead of working against it. And that's why we get sick. We just abandon this idea that we're part of the system, and then community, and this is like the way you surround yourself with people and environments that you create for yourself. So we're nothing more than we're basically an accumulation of our environments and the people that we hang out with, and the food and the substances that we consume. So this is all spiritual, whether we believe it or not. And then this whole world of expression, right? I mean, like, cultures since the start of time have danced, have sang, have drummed, and have communed together. There's an element of community and connection. But those things that I mentioned are forms of physical expression, emotional, spiritual expression, but also like concentration, focus, presence in the moment. Like there's nowhere else to be when you're drumming or dancing or singing, right? I mean, you're in the moment, you're enjoying life, and that is, I think that one of the essence of a lot of these teachings is that's where the joy and happiness lies, is in the moment, not in the past. Where we're resenting, someone that did us wrong, and emotionalizing past experiences, putting us in a state of depression, or too far ahead, where we're worrying about stuff we can't control, putting us in a state of anxiety and worry. So I say all this because it seems to me like, I teach meditation and yoga, and it's like, it seems to me like the teachings of the Yoga Sutras and the Buddhism and Hinduism, and, the essence of the core teachings of these spiritual teachings is almost is almost exactly the same thing as what the psychedelic experiences is showing us or reminding us of. Depending on the person's spiritual progress, obviously can only show you what you're ready for. The everyday consciousness, it leaves out more than it lets in. So it only lets you in what you're ready for. But that this is, once you study this and look at it and live it, it's like, it's almost the same thing. You'd have a sage or a yogi saying, well, you don't need psychedelics to find the meditative path, or the spiritual path. And I agree with that. You don't need psychedelics to get on the meditation cushion and the yoga mat and have a spiritual practice. But, in the Western world, in this colonialized world, I mean, I don't know. I don't see any other catalyst that can do what psychedelics can do so quickly. Again, not doing the work for you, but getting you to wake up out of your slumber to actually realize that you need to begin a spiritual practice. So it helps you can get on the yoga mat, be able to meditate, be able to do some of these things. Bring awareness. I think that's a starting point. Bring awareness to some of our bad habits, our behaviors, and slowly but surely reforming and changing them. So, it's I love talking about it because to me this is the essence of it all. I mean, this is what I teach without psychedelics, and obviously when you talk about integration, this is another thing I kind of struggle with when you talk about integration too. It's like my version of integration is applying all these practices, right? I mean, you can't be healthy if you don't move, right? I mean, move mindfully. We can't be healthy if we don't calm the nervous system and have actual practical ways to do these things. So like when we talk about integration, a lot of times we're just talking about like integrating the experience, like making sense of what happened or what came up, and applying it. But to me, it's the integration process. If you want to sustain this and find more happiness and joy on the back end of it, is we have to really, when I say integration, it has to be more of a spiritual practice that's integrated to support this. Otherwise, we're just going to go back to our mundane thinking, our mundane, lazy behaviors, and and it kind of fall back into the way we were before. So the more we can do, I think, just lands up extending the outcomes and gives you a strong foundation to move forward, to forge ahead with some confidence and creativity. Right? It's hard to move forward out of our little world when everything just seems tight and jammed and there's no space. And the experience, psychedelic experience, can bring some awareness around it. Wow, how expanded this world is, and how much freedom there is. And then now we come back into the real world. And it's like, how do we create that, in the moment, and then apply that throughout the day, and then the week, and then the month, and the year, and that becomes a way of life. So super important. I mean, if we're talking about like legitimate long-term success rates, when you talk about doing this work, because there's a lot of people, one and done, blast off, come back. Meditation's not for me, or this is not for me. Yeah, it's hard to really break through if we're just going to keep doing the same things we've done our whole life, and expect that our whole world's going to our whole world's going to change. So I think the spiritual component needs to be talked about more. I'm glad you brought it up. I love talking about it.
I know. I appreciate it so much. In one of your talks I was listening to, I heard you say our nature is to create, and the medicines help us get to a place of action.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
I'm learning more and more about this too. I grew up playing hockey, which is a creative sport, but I never looked at it like that growing up. It was just like something I loved to do because, well, now looking back and understanding maybe some of the neuroscience around it, I was going into flow state. When you're playing hockey, you're playing a creative sport. You're not thinking about anything else. So it's an escape. A lot of these kids, you hear them talk. It's like, wow, that's why they're doing this, is because it's getting them out of the thinking mind. Maybe mom and dad are hard on them, and they're, whatever. Life is a struggle, right? So this is 60 minutes of, we're playing hockey now. We're getting this creative flow. So as I've, begin this work and realizing, what creativity is, and looking at ourselves as creators, co-creators with the divine, right? I mean, we are. That is what we've lost, is the creative nature of being. And I think system itself, I always go back to that, is like, it's done a good job of, making people small, and after a certain age, like, we're no longer creating anymore, because we're not going to teach kids to be creators. We're going to teach them to be, corporate monkey workers of some sort, working in the machine. So I think part of the system itself is taken away or minimized our creative faculties. But to me, it's as more and more I'm learning, is like, if we're not creating, it's like we're doing ourselves a disservice. Like, in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be, building large buildings, or it doesn't have to be necessarily, when you think of creating, it's like, oh, just like creating art, or yeah, of course. I mean, some version, but like, that could be different for you than for me. And what that looks like, it's an emotional expression of something. So whatever that is for you, whatever you like doing, it's like, it's drawing, coloring, making music, dancing, building, whatever that is. It's like, it's like, the more we do that, the more we feel like we're in alignment. I think that's the struggle a lot of people feel right now. The squeeze is there's a lack of alignment. We're working a job we don't love. We're around people that we might not necessarily be around if we didn't put ourselves in that situation. This is a lot of stuff that's not in alignment. But then once, art, ask artists, they're in their happiest and their joyful space when they're creating. And that could only happen in the present moment, right? So, and it's all the spiritual texts is always talking about back to the present moment, right? I mean, all the gurus, everyone's talking about that. But how do we get there? And this is why I got into rhythmic drumming. Honestly, it's obviously a form of creativity and expression, but it's like, I found that it's hard to teach people to sit. The simplicity of just sitting. It's like, ask someone to sit for 5 minutes. Their body's still riddled with tension, tightness, that they can't sit. This is what the physical practice of yoga is for, is to prime the body to sit in meditation. But I realized, like, that teaching that is not that easy, to young kids, but even adults, because they have years and years and years of tension built up and a suppressed emotion. That I got into rhythmic drumming because I thought it was an easier way to teach meditation. Drumming historically, the Buddhists, the fish drum and the shamans, and like, you go through all cultures since the start of time, they had the drum as a centerpiece of, their ceremonies and their cultures. But I found, again, making sense of it through experience and reading about it, is that it was easier to get someone to bang something, whether it was a fish drum or just, bang a little mini djembe, or just even like body percussion, to get in the present moment and do that, than just to sit still, because people are uncomfortable sitting still, and they have a misunderstanding of what meditation is. They're like, I'm trying to stop my thoughts. I'm like, well, you're not going to stop your thoughts. your mind is there for a reason, but we can begin to work on quieting the thoughts to some degree, or slowing them down and just like acknowledging them, but not emotionalizing them. But I found like the drum, even with young kids, getting some rhythm and getting back to the drum. There's like obviously a level of connection there with the hands and the grounding nature of the drum, focusing the mind, concentrating the mind on something, but it becomes meditative. You do that for a minute or two or three or four, and you can get someone to sit longer when it's enjoyable, right? So I'm always trying to find creative ways, right? This is like me tapping into my creative. It's like, wow, it's like we need to find better ways to introduce mindfulness, because the reality is a lot of people get turned off by meditation because they don't think they're doing anything, even though that is kind of the end result, is to not be doing anything, is to just to be and to sit and to just quiet. It's hard for people. So if there's a more enjoyable progression to that, that's kind of where I'm at now, is finding more creative, fun, enjoyable ways to get people to sit and be, and create and express all the same, right? So it's a lot for people to understand when they've never done any of this, and then they just don't understand what we're actually trying to get to. But I think slowly but surely, people are craving this, right? They know that there's a better way than what they've been taught, and I think they're realizing that they have to have some sort of ownership in their well-being. Otherwise, if you don't have any ownership and you're not responsible for your own well-being, that means you're a victim. That means that something or someone else is responsible for healing you or helping you. And I'm obviously a huge supporter of people helping others, but I mean, we can only help someone so much, right? We could lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink it. Like, they have to do the work. Obviously, we can introduce them to an experience, but they need to, engage, and they need to do the work. But I think the sacred must be staked, and if you're ready for this, you will find it. And if you're not, unfortunately, you're going to keep going down that dark path that leads, unfortunately, to death and decay. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, and that's the world we're in. We're in an interesting time and place. I think there's more and more people waking up to this. Fortunately, there's people unnecessarily dying off because of the ignorance to it too. And I think that's probably always been the case, right? But I think it's becoming more magnified as we navigate these uncharted times. So,
yep, we like to call it in our community human evolution, real time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
we've got a ringside seat for it. Yeah,
yeah. Right.
I would love to get your take on, especially with so many men that I've witnessed, is our society, acculturates men that they wait until they're so leveraged and so taken down to their knees before they seek help, across the board. And so a lot of times when I hear from men, it tends to be people who are kind of desperate, desperate situations. They've tried to self-medicate, workaholism, tried all these things to self-medicate. And oftentimes they have to almost lose everything before they come. And so a lot of veterans, a lot of injuries, a lot of physical imbalance. How can you envision, moving forward as a society, shifting things so that we're not waiting until we're broken, and we're instilling these things just as part of our everyday life? I would love to get your take on that.
Yeah. Well, I was once one of those guys, so I know exactly what you're talking about, right? I mean, we grew up in a culture where you tough it out, right? It's tough love. It's just like, tough it out and suck it up, right? I mean, how many times I've heard that, and we've heard that growing up. That's just the conditioning of not even just men. I think that's just like, most of these households that we grew up in, right? But that being said, I think what needs to change is how we teach emotional intelligence, right? I mean, it's like, I don't know how long it's going to take for this to be like mainstream, but like, we never talked about our emotions, right? Again, I talked about this earlier. Like, you never have I heard guys talk about their feelings in the locker room, right? It was just like, it's all about toughness. It's all, the ego, right? It's just driving the narrative in there. And then you mentioned your veterans, and you talk about blue collar workers, and it's just like, these guys grew up in a tough household, right? It's tough. And tough it out and sleep when you're dead and all these interesting advices that we get over over time, and they couldn't be more inaccurate. Um, but I think what I've learned, in this journey is that being vulnerable is like the most important thing. Like, as soon as you start opening up and sharing, you realize that like everyone else is going through their version of that. And then it prompts people to be vulnerable as well. I mean, how many times have I heard people thanking me for being vulnerable and sharing my story? It's like, well, I certainly didn't do this like for attention and for a pat on the back, but realizing more and more how powerful vulnerability is, and opening up and talking about things that people aren't talking about. So I think being vulnerable, yeah, we have to be vulnerable. It's like I couldn't expect to know to help somebody if they didn't ask for help, if they haven't shared anything. It's like, so you have to ask, you have to like open up a little bit, crack open a little bit. But I think our job is like, this part of this work is teaching emotional intelligence. I mean, like integration circles and even pre-integration stuff. Like, it's just like we're sitting around and we're talking about the experience, but it's always about the feelings, like what came up, like what did it prompt, forgiveness, acceptance, letting go, like all these things. So these experiences crack open the heart, obviously, and they almost they allow you to be more vulnerable easier, right? I mean, people that normally wouldn't cry in a circle probably would be open and cry in a circle, and that's great. That's exactly what it's supposed to be doing. So I think like an extension of the psychedelic work, and I try and do some version of this through just like teaching mindfulness on its own, is like emotional intelligence. It's like feeling is the most important thing we have. Like, that should be our compass. It's not our intellect, right? It's not what we think, it's what we feel. And then all the sayings are like follow your heart or follow, gut feeling. It's like, well, we got to get back to that intuition. It's like, oh, we know. Well, that was because we did know, it just, we talked ourselves out of it because the mind got in the way again, So I think, I try and do this through the vehicle of yoga. I know yoga's kind of got a weird, cloud around it because it's misunderstood, right? I mean, the whole practice of yoga is condensed into, physical postures. It's like this. So when I teach yoga, we're always trying to get out of the mind, right? It's like quiet the mind, open the heart, right? We're getting back into the heart. So I think it's just education. It's just keeping these conversations like this going. We talk about healing. You can't help but address the emotional body and talk about emotional intelligence. But I think it's going to take some time. The reality is that there is some level of this now being squeezed in these sports organizations to some degree, right? I mean, guys are way more in tune with their bodies. There's mandatory days off based on how guys feel, like HRV, just like collecting some data to see where people's heart rates are at. So we know, like, okay, well, we need to respect the way these guys are feeling. So we need to take a day off today so we can recover. So there's a lot more mindfulness and emotional awareness. But I still think you can get way, 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 way better. And and this might seem like odd thing to talk about, but I don't know how to communicate this because I think it's somewhat of a challenging one. You talk about energy, talk about performance and emotions. Like sex energy, right? It's like to me that was like that is the um, most powerful energy that's used the most inappropriate way, right? And if you teach a young person about sex energy, like right away it gets weird. But imagine you be able to teach that level of emotional intelligence to young, yeah, not just male. I mean, females. I mean, we grew up in this crazy world where like it's all everything is selling sex, and we don't understand, what we're supposed to be representing. We don't understand the energy itself. And from what I understand personally, and from reading about it, like sex energy is creative energy. It's creative force, right? In some way, shape, or form, you can transmute. And in Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, he has a whole chapter on sex transmutation. So I'm saying all this because it does funnel into emotional intelligence. Like, where is this energy coming from? What is this feeling? And how can I constructively and positively direct this energy to create, build, perform, versus just like throw it out to some, random, just, situation or, time and place. So I say all that because I think we have a lot of work to do, but the reality is that there is conversations like this being had. There's veteran groups that are talking about this. There's athletes that are speaking about emotional intelligence, but it's going to take some time because you got to program a deep-seated old school program. But I mean, I'll tell you what, I've seen guys from the Broad Street Bullies era, 74, 75 Stanley Cup guys, the Broad Street Bullies, to like the current day players now that I had coached actually a couple of them that still play for the Flyers. And the spectrum of intelligence, emotional intelligence, consciousness around their bodies, around recovery, right? Traditionally, it was just drink beer after games. And now there's minimal drinking, still drinking, but more cannabis-based products. Guys are microdosing before games. Like when you talk about like Broad Street Bullies, 74, 75 to 2023 current athletes, like it's like a time warp. So that being said, in a pretty small amount of time, for the athlete to evolve like that, I think we can do the same, but get even more into the nitty gritty. I mean, of the emotional intelligence and the energy, understanding the mind, concentration, even better, right? I mean, so it's all about performance at the end of the day, whether you're an athlete or not. So, yeah. So it's needed. I mean, men's groups, women's groups. I know there's a lot of stiff, rigid women too. They grew up in the same type of culture where it's just bottle it up, just tough it up, get up to work and do it, and put a smile on and you're good. So which is not healthy long term for sure.
Right on. A lot of people in our community had a question around athletic performance, and physical performance. And when I was reflecting on that and listening to some of your talks, it reminded me of, I don't know if you saw the documentary In Search of Greatness.
I haven't, no.
It's brilliant. Check it out. And it's about, it's featuring Gretzky, Tom Brady, Jerry Rice, and backtracking to their earlier years. All of them would not have been, you would not have known that they would achieve the performance that they did. So it's not just based on their physicality. It's based on a whole variety of factors, and creativity was one of those, as they did things in a completely novel way that had never been done before. And that's true for athletics, and that's true for any part of life, I think, is that tapping into that source creativity. And I was thinking many, many years ago, I did body work, and I worked with a lot of NBA teams. And I would ask the players, because they all had traveling trainers and body workers who traveled with the team, but I would still get called to work with them and say, well, why do you need me? You have a team trainer. And they said, oh, well, he just works on our bodies.
Yeah.
And we need the other part. So I would love to hear your take. People who are curious about microdosing and working with earth medicines for specifically physicality and performance.
Yeah, I mean, I do my version of what you're doing with athletes and just high level performers. I mean, I work with some dental surgeons and just general executives too. That everyone's some bit drained and worn out, right? And there's a better way to find some energy, creative energy. And I think the cat's out of the bag around microdosing, for performance. And it's I would say it's one of the best tools you could find. Like you talk about like all the things I've seen throughout the years of like supplements and things that guys take that we really can't even quantify some of the stuff. It's just like supplement on this and that. It's like, what is this actually even working? Like obviously some of them are more recovery based to just, get in electrolytes and some minerals. But like you talk about performance on the front end loading of performance and all the stuff we talked about, like the present moment, the flow state, the creativity. It's helping you get to that present moment. Right. And I think this is what people are attracted to. There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of distractions in the world, in sports. There's so many, the media, the fans, the pressure, this and that. And what I'm finding from working with these guys, and as well as my own experience with it, is that it kind of just drowns out the noise, and they just like this. There's some bit of quietness. Again, getting out of the thinking mind. more creative, more maybe reactive is not the word, but just more creative flow, less thinking, and letting things go. Like you make a mistake, you come to the bench, you pause, you reset, you can go back out. You're not dwelling on the last shift and getting in your own mind again, that whole thing. So I think it just helps people just get into that present moment. I also think there's on a physical level, a level of anti-inflammatory, compounds going on there. These guys' bodies feel better too. I think there's an element of recovery too, even if you're taking these on the front end. I think the mushrooms are highly intelligent, and they're adaptogens. They're finding imbalances and they're doing whatever they need to do to kind of bring that balance back. So I think there's an element of recovery associated with it, whether they're even aware of that or not, some of these guys. But the biggest thing is just the presence. Guys with like the zone, whatever you want to call it, the zone, the flow, that presence, and then just not being in their own heads. It's like, how many guys have I seen and coach and play with, like, they're their own worst enemy. We all are, right? We are our own worst enemy, and that we always are, until we can realize that we are, and that's the awareness. But it's getting out of your head. You hear this all the time. This guy's a physical specimen, built like a Greek god, powerful, explosive, agile, could shoot, but he can't get out of his own way, because he's in his own head. He's creating all these stories, and he's sabotaging his performance, right? And so I think I'm not going to sit here and say microdosing is going to solve all these problems. There's a lot of work to do, you know what I mean? Because what it's teaching you, reminding you of, is stuff that we all talked about earlier. We want to really increase that and improve that. You have to actually do it, not just rely on microdosing. So that would be like, okay, now we got to meditate more. We can actually get to these states other ways. Nothing but positive feedback with this. Again, everyone's a little bit different, but it seems to be the presence, the mood, the getting out of the head, and just the being able to just like move on from the game, move on from the mistakes. Because hockey, sports, it's a game of mistakes, right? I mean, you're only as good as your last play, and you have to just be able to just continue to forge ahead. So I think the feedback has been unbelievable. I think it's going to be continue to grow too, as more and more athletes become comfortable, just like cannabis. There's always cannabis users early. Back when I was playing, it was just traditional flower because there wasn't an abundance of products and precision dose products, and combinations of THC, CBD, CBN, like all these things. I think you're going to see these types of microdose products kind of evolve into the same thing. You already are. I mean, you got blends of lion's mane, blends of cacao, ashwagandha, different dosing, some niacin sprinkled in there or whatever. So it's going to be this world of, supplementation through microdosing, combination of maybe some free, some post, different dosing. I think the science is continuing to grow. But the cat's out of the bag. I mean, as far as performance go, I don't know if guys drink coffee, they take all these stimulants. I mean, there's nothing that beneficial about jacking your nervous system up with stimulants, thinking that it's actually helping with performance. I used to do it, and I didn't want the puck. Like I'd be so nervous. I get rid of the puck. Imagine I could have gone back in time and tried microdosing and been a little calmer on the ice, a little more clear, a little more composed. But that's where these guys are at now. It's such a high level performers game now. The skill level's through the roof, and these guys spend so much money in strength and conditioning and recovery that they want to be the best. They need to take care of their bodies because their bodies and their minds are their money makers, at least for now. And they're aware that they need to preserve it. Otherwise, someone's taking their job. So it's only going to get bigger and better. I mean, you see cannabis in the locker rooms now, like through the organization, like cannabis-based products, mainly CBD oils and topicals. I think you're going to see the same thing with, at some point, that this is going to be passed down by strength and conditioning. This is going to be part of the sports science program. It needs to be if you want to do it right. Might be a few years away, but nonetheless, it's trending that way.
Absolutely. One of my favorite parts of the microdosing process is I work with a lot of high performance people, people who hold a lot of responsibility, and they'll start off, and one of their concerns on the intake call sometimes like, Case, I can't be weird, like ever. I need to be always on at a high level of performance. And very quickly, a few weeks into practice, they realize not only are they not off, they're more on than they have ever been. They're more articulate. Their reflexes are better.
Yeah.
Their reaction is better. Whether they're playing a sport or they're in a meeting, they're like, I have my intuition back. Like I can see what's going to happen before it happens. I know what's going to be said before I can see problems from around the corner and prevent that from. So that's all of these things. So and then we laugh about it later because they went from a few weeks before being nervous about it to, I want to make sure I have a big speech coming up and I want to make sure I microdose that morning.
Yeah. Right.
So it happens really fast. And it's just, as you said, it's spreading so quickly. So yeah, I appreciate it so much. I would love for you to share with everybody just kind of like a day in your life. Like, what is your day-to-day practice like at this point?
So every morning it's just a staple. It's first thing is hydration, right? Just got to hydrate the cells, mineralize the water. So throw a little lemon, some Celtic or Himalayan pink salt, or just going out of my way to mindfully hydrate because we've been sleeping all night, and obviously we are a body of water. So and then move and meditate. So depending on the day, I might bang out my full practice of yoga. Pretty much that's all I do is for exercise now is yoga, honestly. So it'll be either a full form or a half form, depending on the day. And then I meditate after, generally 30 minutes. So every morning, it's just like it's a staple. It needs to be done, and it's amazing how much how much better you feel. Obviously, starting the day off, and then I would like to, if depending on time, squeeze in a little bit of reading and or 5-10 minutes of journaling, and maybe some drumming in there too. So then I'll work. Just go. You probably start with emails after that, or it's usually the first thing. Is get back to the default reality of what we need to do to keep this thing moving along. And then depending on the day, obviously it could have, I have a lot of meetings. I'm an advisor for a few different companies, and, just always bringing some pieces together. So emails, calls, stuff like that. And then somewhere throughout the day, I like to pause again, and it's either sit in silent meditation or just connect to the drum for 20, 30 minutes, usually around lunch if I can, just like some bit of a break. And then, depending on the day itself, again, if I only did a half full yoga, I try and get a full squeeze in a full practice every day. So if I didn't do that, I will do that at some point. If I did, then the movement might be done for the day. At some point later in the day, before bed, I either drum and or journal to some degree. And drumming is just like, it's my thing now. It's like I tell people, and I'll share this, probably the first time I share this publicly. It's like, there hasn't been anything in my life that I've connected to like I did hockey with the drum. It's just like it's putting me in the same state, but in a different world. It's hard to explain.
Mm-hmm.
You would understand it. I'm probably not doing a good job of communicating to your audience, but again, that meditative state, there's creative expression, there's creative flow, much like hockey, but just like the energy and the feeling I get when I pick up the drum and hold it, it's just like, I don't know. There's just power there. Just like when I grabbed the hockey stick, it was just like there was like some level of power when I was playing. And I see this as like a big vehicle for me is, obviously integrating the drumming into the mindfulness through the yoga and all that stuff. Because if you want to get people to meditate and understand how to really do this, I think that there's more fun, enjoyable ways to get people to understand the process of. So I always kind of wrap up the day, raising vibrations, the drum and connection. And then I've been, really trying to put stuff down to paper, just if it's just ideas, it doesn't have to be like a formal journal session, but just like things that come up. Because when you're drumming and you're doing this stuff, it has a way of moving, things out, but also creates space for new things to come in, right? You said intuition, wherever that ends up being downloaded. So to do that. And then I'm a foodie. So throughout the day, I'm always, I generally fast, intermittent fast about noon, depending on the day. I'll break my fast with some fruit, but I love cooking and food prep. So somewhere in there, making some baba ganoush or hummus or, something along the lines. I'm cooking like probably 2 meals a day at least, or food prepping, whatever that looks like. So that's, part of the practice too, right? You gotta feed the temple. You gotta take care of the temple through nutrition. So I think that's kind of, probably a normal day to some degree. But it's just, the morning is non-negotiable. It's like, it's like I have, and I get up really early too. It's like I got to get up early and give yourself some space to breathe, and just so you're not rushed. Most people are getting out of the bed 5-10 minutes late, and they're behind the eight ball the whole day. So this is about managing stress, and creating more space throughout the day in our lives, in our brains, in our thinking, in our way of life. Like, it has to be obvious in the way we're setting up our day and being some bit organized with it. I still got work to do on organization, and just some of the stuff I need, because I got a lot of stuff, and sometimes I think I can remember instead of writing it down in the moment. And but applying, this organization around the structure of the day, and interfacing that with some other stuff. But it's a process. We're all working on ourselves and trying to get better. And but I think the morning routine is so powerfully profound when you talk about trying to change the course of action and change daily behaviors, because you're setting yourself up for success. Like, you're increasing the prana, the life force, the energy right from the start. Right, we're connected, we're grounded, and we're calmer. Our minds are a little clearer. We moved a little bit, feel a little better, and going back to feeling. We're not stiff and tight and anxious. So, I just think that whatever that looks like for the audience, and for you at home, like, find your version of that. Doesn't have to be what I do or you do. Finding the best, version of yourself, and it's starting with small a version of that, right? I mean, I wouldn't expect anybody to come out of the gate meditating for 30 minutes, maybe 2 minutes. Just sit still for 2 minutes. Maybe move for 5 minutes. Maybe just getting up and hydrating is a win for you, on that specific day. So just little wins and being good with them. I think a lot of things, a lot of people too, and I was guilty for this, is being so hard on yourself, right? I mean, this element of self-compassion, self-love, that it's like, oh, I didn't do it this morning, and then you're shaming yourself. It's like, oh, you dumbass, you didn't do this morning. It's like, it has to be this a level of acceptance, or you didn't do it long enough. Oh, I didn't move long enough. It's like, well, guess what? You did the best you could. You moved for 5-10 minutes. It's better than nothing. Self-talk is super important for how we feel, obviously. So just be good with starting. Just move. Just do something, and then build. Just keep building and doing more, and being more creative with it, trying something new. But you got to buy yourself some time to do that. If you're waking up 5 minutes before you got to get out the door, like, good luck. It's not going to be overly successful.
Beautifully said. And thank you for sharing about drumming. I love that's such a beautiful example of what we've seen over and over and over again is, sometimes people are just like, I can't meditate. I'm trying. I know that's what I'm supposed to do, or I can't journal. Like, I know I'm supposed to journal, but it's really just to find that thing, awaken to that thing that's going to tap you into, it's not really about the meditation. It's tapping you into that flow state, that oneness and that presence. So whatever it is, if it's drumming, if it's whitewater rafting, if it's jumping out of an airplane, like, it's going to be different for all of you. And a lot of people I've witnessed, sometimes the medicine's job is that it connects you to that thing in your life. You would have never found it otherwise, but it's like it awakens this little thread, and you follow the thread, and it's like a connection to a country or geography, or it's a thing. And then once you are there doing that thing, it's like, this is a remembering. Like, I've done this. I've done this before. I've done this before, right? Yeah. Thank you.
I've had that for sure. That experience for sure. And I think we talk about remembering, like, there was a small phase of my early childhood when I think it was like fourth or fifth grade, like elementary. Like, they had a drum kit in the music room, and I found myself getting there early and just like banging on a little bit. Like, I had felt like I was connected to the drum before, but then I went years and years and years without picking up a drum. And the drumming I do is not like full on like drum kit. It's like djembe drumming, like West African drumming, hand drumming. It's just a little more accessible, easier to to manage. You don't have to have a $10,000 drum kit to practice. But what we were saying resonated with me, because it was like, remembering, like, I had this connection with this before, maybe in another lifetime, who knows? But it felt right, and it just reminded me, like, this is it. Like, this is another one of your vehicles, and I've had other downloads in my ceremonies too, around just like I don't know if it just helps bring alignment, it just helps you find alignment or the things that you're passionate about or the things that you're good at that you've suppressed. I think it's, again, bubbling up that the creative faculties, whatever that is for you in that moment, right? I mean, maybe you're a good drawer and you just haven't been practicing that. And then all of a sudden it's like, man, you know what? I gotta draw again, or I gotta write again. I gotta get back to my writing. I gotta get back to my so and so, or I gotta go and you hear this a lot. It's like, oh, I got to call this person. It's like remembering these things that you have responsibility to do to keep these relationships, the relationship to self and others going. So I like that because it's true. It almost happens every time there's some sort of remembering reminder, and a little tool, a little tidbit of essence to kind of grab a hold of and integrate into your life. Powerful.
Beautiful. Thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you so much for being with us today. I love to wrap up asking guests, suspending all reality in your dream of dreams, how can you envision microdosing and earth medicine practice, ceremonial practice integrating into modern society in your dream of
Ooh,
dreams?
my dream of dreams. Wow. Oh man, I mean, I think about this quite often, and I've always been like stuck on this, like, wow, why can't humans figure this out? And why can't we all find peace and love? Why can't we all, be united and grow together and be stewards of this world, of this earth, and do what's right, and I haven't really come up with a great answer to, besides like there's light and there's darkness, there's yin and there's yang, and there's always been evil and there's always been good, right? And I'm not sure that we can separate the two. So in a perfect world, I would say yes, we can get to a level of consciousness where we can all live together, we can all help each other. It's this beautiful world of growing food together and doing everything together, and everyone um, is doing their part. Individually and as a collective. It's for the better good. Obviously, that's not what's happening in this world, right? I mean, it's a bunch of greedy people on their own individual agendas, just not worrying about the collective, not even just people, but the animals, the earth, the trees, the environment itself. We've just like disconnected from reality, I guess, if you will. So in a perfect world, we can introduce these things to the population. There's no resistance, and we heal as a species. That we can maybe make sense and shed all these past life traumas and get to a place of actual evolution as a species. Because I don't think we're there yet, obviously. But I know that's not realistic, right? There's always going to be the darkness. The darkness is always going to be there because it's always been there to separate us from spirit, from source, right? And because I think part of our existence here on this planet is to help the soul evolve, right? And I mean, I'm not sure that it can, these souls can evolve if everything was so perfect and everyone was all enlightened. So I think, as I, learn more and, think I know more, which I don't know anything, I just realized that like that this type of work is really can only be done by a certain group of people, like a certain amount of population. It can't be for the whole world. It did. I would like it to be, but I don't think the system will allow that to happen. Right? I mean, there needs to be people that are living in ignorance and suffering, and then there needs to be people to be waking out of that and evolving the soul and finding themselves and minimizing suffering and pain and maybe finding these higher vibrations, and kind of applying the spiritual text to evolve the soul. So I don't know if I've given you a great answer. In a perfect world, I would love everyone to heal. I would love all generational trauma. I would love all family systems, ancestral trauma to be healed, and everyone to find joy and happiness in the moment in this lifetime. That would be the ideal, a perfect of perfects. But I think the second part of that a more realistic version is just to continue to forge this work ahead and have more people maybe have the light shine brighter. So maybe we can shine out some of the darkness. There's always going to be the darkness there. Maybe wake up some some people that are really dark, maybe making them a little lighter, maybe you can soften the darkness a little bit, that would be it. Because the darkness, as you start peeling back this onion, is pretty dark, it's pretty dark. And I think as you do more spiritual work, you're more aware of the darkness, right? I mean, it's kind of like you can't have one without the other. It's like you can't be all like, oh yeah, I'm doing all this work, and I'm just like completely blind to what's going on over here. It's like, oh wow, this is why this work exists. Is because we need to bring more light to the darkness. So not a great answer, but I think it's just continue to do the work and just raising more consciousness in our communities in different ways. Yeah, through psychedelics, obviously amazing catalyst. But I'm realizing through other things, again, like primal things like the drum and these ancient teachings like meditation, if we can just get people to be better, however that looks, raise consciousness, I think the world will be better and drown out some of the darkness, maybe push some of this darkness out. But push it all out, it might be a pipe dream, but that would be like a dream of all dreams. Yeah.
Beautiful. I think it's a phenomenal answer. You reminded me of, I think in your answer, I think people underestimate the power of their own healing.
Yeah.
Once you heal, you realize you're not just healing for you, you're healing forward and backward in all directions. You're healing your lineage that has been going on for you're healing everyone in your lineage that is to come, all the ripples of who you're going to. And just by the token of you healing and you expressing yourself, it's so, so powerful. And it just reminded me, I was reading an occasion with Michael Meade, who's a mythologist and spiritual teacher. And he had a close colleague that he had taught with often. And he was with his colleague and he knew his colleague had a beautiful, beautiful singing voice. And Michael Meade was a drummer too. He also expressed himself through drumming. And he said they gave a talk. And at the end of the talk, someone in the audience asked for his colleague to sing, would he sing to them? And he said, he said, we'll do it together. And in that moment, they sang and drummed together. And that's what I feel like the individual healing that we're doing, that's the effect it has, is it gives people permission. We learn by osmosis almost, and it passes from person to person. So I do think people often ask me like, well, what am I going to do? I feel so overwhelmed by the state of the world right now. We're so far, we're so far today from where we can be as humans. How do we get there? And I think it's once you recognize the power you have as an individual and the ripple effect that can have just simply by standing up and drumming with someone is really beautiful.
Totally. Yeah. Well said. And I feel the exact same way. We all just need to be our individual ripples, and that ripple ripples into someone else in our community. And then that ripple, like you said, it gives people permission. It's like, oh, wow. Like, whether they see it through you, they see you doing it. It's empowering. And, one little win for them ripples out their ripple, and maybe a larger ripple, a wave, who knows? And then maybe they get 10 people on their wave, and that's all you can do. It's like, all the spiritual teachers talk about, you be the change, right? I mean, you can't expect the world to collectively change if you're not going to do it. And you can't expect your network to change if you're not doing it. And you can't expect your family tree to keep, or to change, and some of these traumas to dissipate if you're not doing the work. You're just going to pass down your traumas and your issues to your children, and it's going to continue. So it's every which way. And I agree fully. It's our responsibility to be leaders, whatever that looks like. And we just worry about us, and the rest takes care of itself, right? I mean, that's what I've learned in my experience. You can't worry about the rest of it. You can't do much about it. All you can do is do your work and do your job and carry around and emit love and compassion for the world and people, and people see it, feel it, maybe not, but just be a ripple. It's all you can do. I mean, you can't control what's going on outside of myself, really, So yeah, well said, for sure.
Beautiful. So to wrap up, how can people find you? Can you share a little bit about how you work with people? Are you doing group work? Are you doing studio work, one-on-one work? Yeah, share how folks can find you.
Yeah, sure. I kind of do a little bit of all of that. Group work, teamwork, individual work. So I have a website, rileycote.com. I'm also on Instagram, rileycote32. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter. LinkedIn and Instagram are probably the two best social media platforms. And you can just email me at rileycote.com. And depending on the type of work, obviously we can discuss that. But yeah, kind of do it all. I'm getting into more group work and teamwork. I'm realizing, again, through the drum. The drum seems to be a pretty interesting vehicle. So people can connect with it. You can get more people engaged. Talk about teaching something, having people engaged in it. It's not so mundane. It's not so boring where you can flake out so easily. So I think I'm going to be interfacing the rhythmic mindfulness, the rhythmic drumming into more of this group type of work. Talk about connection, team building, all that. Would love to, continue to show that work, which I will be doing here in the new year. So reach out, any questions. I appreciate that.
Amazing. We're so grateful. And where can people watch the ESPN documentary?
It's still on ESPN Plus.
Perfect.
So it still lives on that platform. I've seen it on a couple others. I know they showed it up in TSN up in Canada, maybe Hulu. I also have a link too. If people are interested, I can share it to them. If they don't have ESPN or ESPN Plus, I could certainly share a link. With no commercials. So
yeah, I know it's on ESPN Plus because that's where I was able to view it. So I encourage everybody to check it out. It's so inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for listening in. And we'll include, how you can find Riley in all the ways in our show notes. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Microdosing for Healing podcast. Are you ready to take the next step? Please visit us at microdosingforhealing.com to access our free Microdosing 101 workshop. In it, you'll learn more about our diverse community, our supportive group programs, and discover if earth medicine practice might be right for you. See you in the next episode.